highlights.
William Ruto's trial at ICC now postponed. Just what's happening?
Hawataki suluhisho. Hawa yale wanafanya ni siasa. Na sisi siasa tunajua kupiga siasa.
Hardliners are not the people we want at this moment.
CORD Jubilee in bare knuckle fight over key House committees.
Kenya yet to meet Millennium Development Goals on Health as Nurses Week is marked.
Mara moja imekuja na mbio. Nilitoroka si kurudi kuangalia nyuma.
Still in this bulletin, myth or reality, why a tumbled rock is eliciting fear of the unknown in Sabatia.
Well, good evening and welcome. Now, the trial of Deputy President William Ruto and former radio journalist Joshua Rapsang at the International Criminal Court has now been postponed. The trial that was initially scheduled to start on 20th May has now been rescheduled until after a public status conference set for May the 14th.
Well, during the public status conference, the parties and participants will present their observations on the prosecutor's request to add 5 witnesses to the list of witnesses and the defense's request to postpone the trial date.
Well, Ruto's team requested that the chamber set a new trial date for not earlier than November 2013 so as to provide Ruto and his defense team adequate time to conduct the investigations necessary to properly prepare for his trial.
Well, Ruto's request came about due to what he says is a significant burden on his defense team brought about by the prosecutor's office, which has failed to provide timely and effective disclosure.
Ruto's defense team further said the prosecutor's office delayed the disclosure of the identity of one witness until April 17th and have yet to disclose the identity of another witness.
Well, we'll be keeping tabs on that developing story. Moving on to other news-making headlines, the row between Jubilee and CORD coalitions over the control of the key parliamentary committees deepened today, with Jubilee withdrawing an earlier offer to give CORD an additional 3 slots in each of the committees.
Now, Majority Leader Aden Duale says the decision to surrender the slots has been overturned since CORD is not displaying what he calls, quote, any goodwill towards resolving the stalemate.
Well, CORD, however, will not settle for less and is still demanding that Jubilee cedes control of the public accounts and public investments committees to the minority. Well, KTN's Rita Tinina reports on the looming showdown.
It is important that the House debates the names of members here on Tuesday.
With just hours to the debate on the composition of House committees, Jubilee and CORD are still deadlocked over who should have control of 2 key committees, the Public Accounts and the Public Investments Committees.
We are ready with all the names of all committees.
There is mischief in this. Because if there is no mischief, why can't the government side just let go the leadership of these 2 committees?
Jubilee, which has the majority in the House, ceded the chairmanship of the 2 committees to CORD. Jubilee had also surrendered 3 of its 18 positions in each of the 2 committees to CORD. Now, Jubilee says it has withdrawn the offer.
Because I've realized the goodwill that I have given has been abused. And I think our colleagues were not even serious about the number.
Having 13 or having 11 membership in Park and Peak doesn't make any difference. So long as the government side has the majority.
The revised standing orders do not stipulate who should chair the PAC and PIC. Jubilee says it will not be the first time that the government will have a majority in the watchdog committees.
Bunge la 8 wakati wa KANU, Mheshimiwa Mwai Kibaki alikuwa kiongozi wa Public Accounts Committee. Lakini wengi wa wabunge katika hiyo kamati walikuwa wametoka serikali kutoka kwa chama cha KANU.
Any civilized democracy would demand that such committees are chaired by parties that are basically outside government. and such committees should be controlled by parties that are outside.
CORD has threatened not to present its list of members to committees and to boycott parliamentary business unless the minority get control of the two oversight committees.
It would be really bad if you are asked to chair a committee which reports will be killed in the committees before they arrive on the floor of the House.
Jubilee, on the other hand, says it is ready with its list and will continue with business as usual, not just on the floor of the House, but in the committees as well.
The quorum for a committee is 9 members. So in every committee, there are 18 members of Jubilee. So we have a quorum.
With Jubilee and CORD maintaining their hardline stance over the composition of key parliamentary committees, a showdown looms as the two rival sides prepare for a face-off in yet another contest over numbers. Rita Tinina, KTN, Nairobi.
All right, that story leads us to a big question, and tonight we ask,
well, do you think CORD should be allowed to control parliamentary oversight committees? Do you think CORD should be allowed to control parliamentary oversight committees?
well, send your yes and no responses with the brief comments to the number 8040, and Betty and I will sample your views during this live newscast and give you the poll results at the end of this bulletin.
Now, 2 Iranian nationals linked to terrorism activities have been handed life imprisonment by the Nairobi High Court.
Well, the 2 who were arrested last year with highly explosive substances were handed the heavy penalty in what the High Court says is as a result of the cry of victims of terror activities.
Now, the arrest of the 2 saw a war of words between Israel and Iran, 2 strategic allies of the Kenyan government. Well, KTN's Dennis Onsarigo has the details.
Of Ahmed Mohammed and Said Mansour in June last year nearly kicked off a diplomatic storm between Tehran, Nairobi and Washington after the Israeli government claimed Iran was planning attacks on its foreign offices in Africa. After 1 year behind bars, in Nairobi court has now jailed the 2 for life, while sending them to jail. Justice Kiare Waweru said the maximum penalty was informed on the cries of victims of terror attacks on the Kenyan soil. The 2 have attended court while behind bars in a trial that has attracted reactions from Iran. The Iranian ambassador to Kenya told KTN in an exclusive interview a few months ago that the arrest of the 2 Iranian nationals had the shadow of a wider scheme by Israel of sidelining the Arab country.
We believe the coverage, media coverage, and the false information given to the media during the last month since they has been arrested shows that there is a plan, a plot to affect Iran and Kenyan relation.
The Kenyan government was forced to cancel a multi-billion shilling oil deal with Iran a few weeks after Israel accused Iran of planning attacks on its foreign offices in Africa. The deal could have seen Kenya import 4 tons of crude oil from the Arab country.
It seems that there is a plot by Israeli agent, intelligence may have some other plot against Iran over here. Last month we have our vice president here. We reached a good agreement, including was oil agreement.
Mohammed and Mansour were found guilty of possessing 15 kilograms of the powerful explosive RDX. The 2, according to the police, had arrived in the country in June last year before ferrying the explosives into the country by sea. What is not clear, though, is the failure by the Kenyan police to arrest or connect any of the suspects to a local contact person, raising serious questions. Were the 2 Iranians on their own? Did the Kenyan police fail to get to the root of the explosives and other suspects by arresting the 2? The latest jailing of the 2 has once again thrust Kenya into the international limelight, a country trying to fight terrorism and balancing ties with strategic allies. Denson Sarigo, KTN Prime.
President Uhuru Kenyatta has arrived in the United Kingdom to attend a 3-day summit on Somalia. This is the president's first official visit outside Africa. KTN's Edith Kimani now reports on what Uhuru's mission in UK is meant to achieve in as far as stability in Somalia is concerned.
President Uhuru Kenyatta's first visit out of Africa is a crucial one. Uhuru is one of 50 country representatives attending the London Conference on Somalia. No doubt, the relationship between Kenya and her northeastern neighbor has been a tumultuous one, and this conference hopes to find solutions to the troubles. The UK, together with Somalia, are hoping to rally international support for the transitional government. Somalia is dusting itself off from a brutal 2-decade war. It is no wonder then that key on the conference agenda is security. After numerous attacks both on Kenyan waters and land by the Somali-based Al-Shabaab, Kenya knows all too well the effects of an unstable Somalia. However, observers say things are looking up. With the help of the Somalia Armed Forces and the Africa Mission in Somalia, which Kenya is a part of, Somalia is said to be slowly getting back on its feet. The diaspora is reportedly slowly returning to Somalia. This will be another area President Uhuru will be keen to see happen. As it stands, Kenya hosts an estimated 500,000 Somali refugees. Kenya's stake in this decision cannot be underestimated. However important the Kenyan voice is, there are those who did not take too kindly to President Uhuru's presence. An icy headline on a British paper welcomed Kenya's new president to the conference. Information PS Bitange Ndemo has allegedly asked the newspaper to apologize, a request that has itself generated debate. Edith Kimani, KTN Prime.
Well, and back home, the world is commemorating the World Nurses Week. And here in Kenya, the week-long celebrations began with pomp and color at the Kenyatta National Hospital. Now, celebrations aside, the theme was closing the gap, Millennium Development Goals. While Kenya may still be lagging behind in achieving the health-related goals, the head of Kenyatta National Hospital, Richard Lesiampe, assured Kenyans that Kenyatta National Hospital is well on its way to closing the gap.
33-year-old Lydia Nyambura was hoping to give birth to her second child. However, she delivered not 1, not 2, but 4 babies.
So vile mimi ningeomba tu kwanza ni shukrani kwa Mungu na shukrani pia kwa huyu bibi. Maana si kazi rahisi. Juu wakati mwingine nilikuwa nakuja namuona tu nasikia tu machozi lakini siwezi kumsaidia.
Ningeomba tu wale tu wanaweza tushikilie kwa maana hii kazi ni kubwa.
Lydia may be overwhelmed by the 4 more children, but she's among the lucky women who survived childbirth in Kenya. And her 4 children may even be lucky enough to survive to their first birthday.
Kenya's rate of postnatal deaths per 1,000 lives has also fallen by more than half.
The theme for this year's Nurses Week is to close the gap as the country moves towards achieving the Millennium Goals.
3 of the Millennium Goals related to healthcare is the reduction of child mortality, the improvement of maternal health, and also the reduction of the prevalence of HIV, AIDS, and malaria and other diseases. But this can only be achieved by an improved healthcare system, which in the past has been neglected when it comes to the development agenda.
Before the last survey in 2009, the transmission of HIV from mother to child was still high. Lesiampe says that this has improved by more than 97% at the Kenyatta National Hospital.
And this has been made possible by empowering of the nurses.
However, more can be achieved by the employment of more nurses and doctors, improvement of hospital equipment, and creating awareness about various communicable and non-communicable diseases. While Kenyatta National Hospital seems to be closing the gaps when it comes to the Millennium Development Goals, other public hospitals and dispensaries are not necessarily sharing in the success. Catherine Omwando, KTN.
Now, as a nurse serving at the largest referral hospital in North Rift region, work doubles. And as May 6th is the International Nurses Day celebrated across the world, there is little to be celebrated as a Kenyan nurse, considering the many challenges that they face in the health sector.
Well, KTN's Mercy Kandiye caught up with Tekla Sum, a nurse working at the Emergency and Accidents Department at the Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital in Eldoret, and brings us the story of a day in the life of a nurse.
Every day, Tekla Sum reports to work at 7:15 a.m., a profession she has been in for 8 years now, a nurse. Currently, the nurse in charge at the Accidents and Emergency Unit at the Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital in Eldoret.
It's like a beehive whereby you're supposed to sort out all the bees that are in that beehive. There's so many activities going on.
Today is an easy day though, says Nurse Tekla. Despite the visible activity at the emergency unit, Tekla says today's work is not as much. Serving at the only referral hospital serving the Western Kenya region, the challenges of the job are amplified.
Because according to the WHO and the Nursing Council of Kenya, as in the nurse at the accident and emergency or the wards, the nurse to patient ratio is 1:1. Here I'm a nurse and I'm having the nurse to patient ratio is about 1 to 30 patients.
The main challenge, however, remains the loss of a patient. And just a few minutes ago, one patient who had been referred from Nandi County just died.
It is not easy to become a nurse. You really have to have a heart, to be patient. A nurse stays with the patient for more than 24 hours.
The emergency unit alone receives up to 700 patients in a day, and so the nurses here are always on call, a career path that one chooses, one that involves saving lives, with the average salary of a nurse at the referral hospital being 50,000 shillings.
You know, I wish someone would recognize all this that the nurse does. The nurse also changes the bed of the patient. The nurse has to assist the patient walk into the toilet.
And so we leave Nurse Tekla to attend to her patients, and as the world celebrates the International Day for Nurses, Tekla hopes that the nurses will be celebrated and dignified.
The life and work of a nurse is very demanding, and as Nurse Tekla Sum puts it, one needs to have an angelic heart. The number of patients trickling in here at the largest referral hospital serving the Western region is very high. They all need to be served by these available but few nurses, all in a day's work. Mercy Kandiye, KTN at the Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital in Eldoret, Uasin Gishu County.
Thank you, Mercy. Now to education matters. With most schools reopening this week, the new education laws are set to take effect immediately. The regulations that were signed into law by former President Mwai Kibaki earlier this year will see major changes that will transform the traditional operating systems of Kenyan schools. According to law, every child has a right to free and compulsory education. In this regard, parents who fail to send their children to school will be fined up to 100,000 shillings. The laws also stipulate that parents and guardians shall not pay tuition fees in any public school. This also includes admission fees. Any other charges should be subject to approval by the Education Cabinet Secretary. Further, head teachers under the laws cannot expel students at will. Well, this can only be done by the County Education Board. Essentially, any student who is expelled from school should be admitted in a postal institution where they will be corrected and still continue with their studies. The laws also demand that no school will deny any child admission as a result of their gender, ethnicity, religion, color, disability, or culture. Additional, teachers have been prohibited from subjecting students to torture, cruelty, degrading treatment, and punishment. The new laws are slated to take effect immediately. And we want to continue that conversation. In studio right now, I'm joined by Dr. John Mugo, who is an education expert with Elimu Yetu Coalition. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Drastic changes in the education sector from the traditional operating systems of the Kenyan schools. How are stakeholders in the education sector receiving these changes?
Now, I must say we are very delighted because this is a law that we were looking forward to after having an act that lasted us from 1968. And what we are seeing now is the principles in this Education Act, which came into force in January this year, is a culmination of two movements. One movement, which was the child protection movement or the child rights movement, and the other one, the constitutional movement. So what we are seeing now in terms of free tuition, in terms of the freedom of children and the responsibility of parents, is actually a constitutional right entrenched under Article 53 of the Constitution. So what we are seeing now is a new change, and we are ready for a big change under this new dispensation. Reminding that when you look at Articles 29 to 34 of this Education Act, it stipulates very clearly about free tuition, so no child now shall be charged tuition.
Okay.
And then moving to now the more child protection articles, like 36 on corporal punishment. So any teacher who is caught now punishing children severely, what is being called torture, is actually liable to a fine of up to 500,000 shillings or 2 years imprisonment.
We'll be getting to that in just a short while, but I want to talk about the parents. They no longer have a choice of taking their children to school or not. What impact do you think this will have in terms of the numbers that we'll see enrollment?
Now, we have two types of parents. We have those who genuinely neglect and they don't take their children to school. And those are the ones who are pushed under Article 30 of this Act, that they are just neglecting their responsibility. But we also have many parents, when you look at places like East Pokot, where it's very insecure, more than 60% of children who are eligible are not going to school. Really, there are big structural issues that need to be addressed, like security, like food, issues of floods, and even availability of schools. So there is a parent really that you can't compel to unless these structural issues are addressed. But we also have other parents who really just don't care about taking their children to school. And these are the ones really that are being now talked about, that you either take your child to school, enroll them, or you are charged up to 200,000 shillings and or up to 2 years of imprisonment, or both. So we have to differentiate between these two parents, where really the structures allow a parent to enroll their children and they don't, and where the structures do not allow. And even if we were to take parents to jail, then maybe you'll have to jail the whole community because there's no school.
Okay.
So these are the two different scenarios that we are going to work with.
Let's talk about the scenario whereby you'll have a huge influx of children being enrolled to school. Do you think the government is ready enough to cater for these children in terms of facilities? There's still places in Kenya where children hold their classes under trees.
Now, the responsibility of the provision of public education is bestowed on the government. So what is going to happen, while we are saying parents are responsible, where there is no school or the school is too far, then parents also can take the government to court to provide that education, because it is stipulated very well under Article 34 that provision of public education is the responsibility of the government. So where really there are no schools, where there are no teachers, where there are no materials for children to learn, then we are going to see pressure being put on the government to make that provision as well.
Okay, we've seen, talking about punishment, the law stipulates that there should be no torture, degrading treatment. What is that? What kind of punishment will be bestowed upon students who fault?
Now, it is clear that corporal punishment was outlawed through a presidential decree in 1999. But we have seen the practice continue. Now, what has happened is that it has been illegalized by an act of parliament, and which means where a teacher harms a child because of whatever reason, then that teacher can be charged in a court of law, because Article 36 of the Basic Education Act provides for that. So, of course, the decision onto what is torture and what is not, then it will depend on the evidence that is provided in a court of law.
And finally, maybe before we wind up, I mean, you have children who do not have access to any kind of education. And of course, you've mentioned that this is whereby these county education boards will come in. But also, speaking about head teachers, they have been told that they cannot expel any student from school. It's the responsibility of the county education board. What is your take on that?
Now, it is good and it is not good. It is good because head teachers now do not have leeway to just expel students because you don't like the parent or because you have personal differences with that student. On the other case, then it must not be made very difficult for principals and head teachers to maintain order in their schools because they are held at ransom. And because expelling a child is that difficult. So there has to be a balance where a head teacher makes a rational decision into the cases to refer to the county education board and the cases to deal with it. Because even if the county education board is going to expel a student, then they are compelled to take them to a correctional institution. Then you ask, are the correctional institutions available adequate for all the discipline cases we have? Take a case of a boys' school which riots and they burn a dormitory and 100 of them are culprits. In which correctional institution are they going to be accommodated? So there are very difficult issues which we are going to be experiencing in this transitional period before the structures are really set up in place.
All right, Dr. Mbugo, thank you so much for joining us on KTN Prime.
Welcome.
Well, we now take a short commercial break, but before we leave, let's just remind you our big question. Do you think CORD should be allowed to control parliamentary oversight committees? Do you think CORD should be allowed to control parliamentary oversight committees? The number is 8040, and we'll sample your comments after this newscast.
Today, Equity Bank registers a 21% rise in pre-tax profit, and we'll be telling you why and how this came to be. Also on tonight's bulletin, analysts look at the 2013-2014 budget. Is it realistic? Well, we'll let you know on tonight's KTN Business Today. Join me, Joy Doreen Bira.
Investment partners or reliable suppliers. Meet the Mauritius Delegation of Investors, Manufacturers and Exporters at the Mauritius Trade and Investment Forum on Wednesday, 8th May at Hilton Hotel, Nairobi as from 10 a.m. Business Forum from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Buyers-sellers meeting on Wednesday, 8th and Thursday, 9th May from 9:30 a.m. to 6 p.m.